This video is to explain the saying that Yeshua said only one thing is needed or more. Well, the full saying is only a few things are needed, indeed only one thing. I'm gonna read first the text that he says that, the full text. It says in Luke 10, starting verse 38, it says, As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary, like Miriam actually, but never mind, who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said, but Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. I'm turning a page. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, You are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. So I'm going to explain what does he mean by that. Uh, he means the few things that are needed are. I'll first say the conclusion, then explain how I got to the conclusion. The few things that are needed are to listen to God, to obey Him, and to, as He called it in this story, to choose what is better, which is the same as what in the story of the Garden of Eden is described that there is the fruit of knowing good and bad. If you look into original text, the name is the fruit of the tree of knowing good and bad is the name of the tree that ate its fruit, and then is like so the things that are needed are to listen to God, to obey Him, and to use the ability to differentiate between what is right and what is wrong, and choose what is right. This is basically you can sum up everything God wants of people by those things, and then those things are indeed one thing in the sense that in two different senses. One is that they are all a part of obeying God. So in a sense, if you do those things, you are obeying God, because like a part of obeying God is listening to Him, and what He wants, a lot of what He talks to people about is, or in some sense, all of it is about using our this ability that we have, unlike animals, and choosing what is better, choosing what is right rather wrong than wrong. Um, so they are as if all those things are like one thing in that sense, and also those things are one thing in the sense that they are all in a way the same thing as choosing what is right or what is better, as he called it in the story, because listening to God and obeying God is essential part of doing that. So they're all, in that sense, those things are like one thing. And then so this is what he means by few things are needed. Indeed one thing is that of people in general, what is needed is to You can either just say to obey God, or you can say to choose what is right, or you can say somewhat more clearly to listen to God, to obey God, and to choose what is right is like what is the few things that are needed. And then you can see that in the story, in the sense that Mary, she out of her own decision, without anyone telling her anything, decided to come and sit and listen to him. So she used that ability, and also she chose right, which is why he says Mary has chosen the better, chosen what is better. Mary has chosen what is better. So you have, he says immediately after saying that Mary has chosen what is better. So you can see that the things that are needed are related to, are either are or are related to choosing what is better. Is and like that's kind of a hint that the one thing that is needed is to choose what is better. And but also what she did was technically was to come and listen to him. So that's also something that is necessary, one of the things that are necessary. And yeah, so it's like in the story you can get that what is needed is listening to him, is at least one of the things that are needed, because that's what she did. And he described what she did, and he is talking about what she did as an example of the few things that are needed, because you see he says that saying in the context of what she did. And what she did was to listen to him, and he called it to choose what is better. And is like, so that's one way you can see that in the story. And something else that is less obvious I want to point out, how you can see this is what he's talking about, is that this story is in a way a positive version of the story of Eve and the snake and eating from the fruit. Because you see it, in both cases you have a woman, you have someone telling her to not listen to God. In the case of Eve, the snake is telling her to not listen to God. In the case of Mary, her sister is telling her to not listen to God. In both cases, there is some pressure on her because the snake is deadly, and in the case of of Mary, her sister, it seems like she lives in the house of, probably like she lives in the house of her sister that owns the place, and her sister is like scolding her to not listening to not listen to God and go do some. I mean, she listened to Yeshua, but it's like the same, to listen to God, and to instead go do something else. So it's like a kind of the same situation, but in the case of Mary, she does listen to God, and unlike in the case of Eve, that Eve like heard God saying what not to eat from the tree, but she ignored it, partly because the snake told not to. So it's kind of like she didn't listen. And then there is that, and also that because she ate from the tree while disobeying God, then the ability to choose between right and wrong in this story of Eve in the Garden of Eden is and kind of Adam also, but I'm focusing on Eve because the comparison to Mary is like that ability of like knowing right and wrong basically is becomes in the story kind of look like a negative thing because it came together with disobedience. But in this story, it's like of Mary in the house of Martha, or like Jesus in the house of, and Mary in the house of Martha, something like this is like the she comes by herself out of her own decision without anyone telling her to. So she basically used that ability in this story for like for like to do opposite of what Eve did when she disobeyed. So it's like you can kind of say the whole thing is like kind of the story is in a way like a positive example version of the same kind of situation. And then when you think about it, like in the story of Eve, in the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, it's like about all of humanity, and all of humanity is like because God like doesn't want all of humanity to be with Him where He lives, and instead be somewhere that people would suffer and get old and die. Um, because of those things, because of like disobedience, and while like also being beings that are capable of knowing what they should supposed to do and not to do. And then like so you can already conclude from this that if someone was not like that, if someone was opposite, let's say, of that, if someone is obedient and use that ability to yes do what he's supposed to do, then God would then this is what God wants of people. So you can understand from this already from this story that this is a summary of like what God basically wants of people is to listen him, to obey him, and to choose at least in important things like at least in critical things, like to choose like what is good versus what is bad, which he calls to choose what is better. So it's like so you can understand from this story of Adam and Eve and the snake that you can understand that this is like what is needed, and then you can by like by logic, and also some things in the other story, like that he says Mary has chosen what is better, and that what she did was to come to listen to him is like to connect the dots, that basically like what he means by the few things that are needed, few things are needed in the end only one thing is like the same, is like basically to do the opposite of like what was described in this the story of even the snake and eating from the tree, like uh, yeah, something like this. So I like kind of draw it. You can kind of see what I mean. Like choose what is better is out of it comes also to listen to God and obey God. So it's like one thing. Like a few things are needed, but they are indeed only one thing. And also you can look at it as like to obey God, like obey God, listen to God, and choose what is better is uh, is like indeed only to obey God. So or like that, and that like Mary and Eve both were like women who told not to listen to God and were pressured, but Mary did listen, Eve did listen, uh, and in the context of ability to know what is good and bad, in the story of Eve it's negative result, and story of Mary it's good result. Uh, so it's like, yeah, that's something I want to share about this story.